for me at the time, it was to, no matter what, to keep my heart open, to just, when we want to contract, when our hearts want to close down or put up walls or contract, which is a normal human experience. But for me, it was, how can I keep my heart open, and how can I breathe in the light into those places? Healing is the application of loving to the places inside that hurt. So how can I continue to choose compassion, forgiveness, acceptance? And I'm saying that might sound nebulous, but there are actually like real tangible practices that we engage in that assist in that process of healing. And, this concept, whether or not people believe in it, but certainly that we can heal something at the root for the last time. So my intention was like, I'm healing, and my intention is, I want to heal this for the last time. And I believe that we can. I believe that we can heal intergenerational patterns for the last time. I believe we can heal personal patterns for the last time. I believe that part of what we're doing as a collective is all of these collective patterns of misogyny and racism and patriarchy are amplified, and we have to look at them. That's part of the process, is like, you can't just heal something with never acknowledging it. It's being brought out into the light. It's painful to look at. It's uncomfortable. It's not going to be easy. And it's through bringing them into the light that we can actually heal them and move forward. And that's a necessary process.
Hello, and welcome to all of you beautiful souls. Thank you for tuning in today to the Heart of the Soul podcast, Earthy Nova on YouTube. My name is Amana, and I am so happy that you're here. I invite you to sync to the cycles of the moon with me, with new episodes on full and new moons. This is a space where we explore what it means to be wild women walking upon this earth, remembering how to turn inward to our innate inner knowings, unearthing that which is often unseen and unspoken. Together we practice using our voices and the ancient ritual of storytelling, connecting about that which unites us as we share our stories of birth, life, and death, honoring shift across time. It is my hope that soaking in these stories will bring you closer to your own inner compass and center you into a more embodied, alive version of your beautiful, unique self. Today is June 18th, 2023, and yesterday was a new moon. I am nearing my bleeding time and feeling the anticipation of that release that will begin any moment or time here. I'm currently on call for a birth and feeling into that liminal, magical, unknown space where the veil is so thin. Today, I am delighted to have Kristin Urbanus with me through the cosmos on Zoom. I met her through a mutual friend, an intuitive medicine woman, Kate Powell, who you heard on episode 59 of this podcast. And I heard Kristin share on Kate's podcast, The Wild Sacred Journey, episode 14. So go and listen there if you're wanting more of Kristin after today's episode. And thank you, Kristin, for being here today. I know just, a little bit about you through your website, our emailing, and the dialogue we've had before we pressed record. But I am excited to hear more of your stories and your insights here today. So I would love for you to begin by introducing yourself in whatever way feels good to you in the here and now.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. And my name's Kristin Urbanus. My home base is Chicago, but I have lived a fair amount of other places. And I'm just happy to be here to explore topics of life and death and healing and growth and transformation. The work that I do in the world professionally is I'm a spiritual psychology and somatic touch practitioner and somatic experiencing practitioner in training. And to me, it's all very interconnected. The work that I do in the world professionally, but also how that interweaves with my life, my social circles, my friends, my own personal growth, etc. Well, thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. I know that what do I want to say here? I'm curious how you got into somatic experiencing work, and maybe tell a little bit about what that is for listeners, because I feel like not everyone knows that term. For me, it's something that I've learned over the last couple of years. I'm not a practitioner in the way that you are, but I think it's really important for people to know about this practice and this body of work.
Yeah. Well, I will start off by saying, and I think we touched on this before we hit the record button, but we're multidimensional in consciousness. So we have a mind, an intellect, but we're so much more than that. We have an emotional body, a physical body, a nervous system, and the nervous system, I feel, kind of drives a lot of our experience. And then we have an energy body. And so somatic experiencing and somatic touch are modalities that work to encourage regulation in the central nervous system. So encouraging us to have more instances of rest and digest and essentially ease and resilience regulation. And so that we can be more present with all of our life experiences, so that when we do have, upsets or on a nervous system level, move into fight or flight or freeze or hyper or hypo arousal, we can integrate that into that healthy, regulated nervous system. So it's a body of work that acknowledges that our nervous system, that we have nervous systems, that they're very important, that they're super important to our health and well-being in the way that we experience our lives. And that, in fact, our nervous systems are changeable. We can expand our capacity for regulation, resilience, rest and digest. And that even if we've experienced some form of, trauma that leads to a dysregulation in the central nervous system, we can repair and really create new neural pathways of regulation.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, like learning this work through Kimberly Ann Johnson has really shifted so much for me. It's like almost hard to describe like what it's changed sometimes, like when people ask about it. But one thing I guess that I can speak to that I feel is really, well, I feel like it's done two big things that are easier to name. Like one thing is like helped me to access and embody like healthy aggression. I absolutely grew up as like a people pleaser woman, like trying to please everyone. I was very quiet a lot, like barely spoke a lot of the time. Went through a period of my life where I really was like afraid to even speak up. I thought what I had to say wasn't valuable, that my voice wasn't like purposeful. Always wanted to keep the peace and not be seen as, someone who was like aggressive but finding like the nervous system work that I've done has helped me to find that like healthy fight, healthy aggression, and be able to stand up for myself in different spaces and places in different ways.
Yeah.
And like the other thing that really, well, being in my body and finding that embodiment has been another. So maybe I can speak to three, but like, even the practice of like, this is my body, and like touching myself and being like, oh, and this is my physical sphere, and taking time to like look in my space and proprioception and like, where am I in time and space and in this physical place right now. And then also I find it has come up a lot in my mothering of
right.
I notice like there were times, and not I'm not perfect. I still do this sometimes where, my child is doing something that I don't want them to do, or I say no or ask them to stop, but without like fully embodying the no and noticing their reaction of that they can feel that, like, you're saying no, but I also see that you're like cooking or something. So you aren't gonna like stop and really make me stop doing that. So it's helped me to learn for my like words and my facial expressions and my actions to all say no, rather than just like saying no but not fully embodying the no.
Yeah.
I wonder for you, like, how did you find this, way of interacting with your nervous system, and like how did it come into your life, and maybe what has it shifted for you?
Yeah. Well, I think you named three really important things. One, embodiment. Just the experience of acknowledging that we have bodies and that are infinitely intelligent. I think that piece is so important because I always say that, yes, our minds are important and our intellect is important. It helps us do many, many things and many practical things. But our body has infinite wisdom. It is connected to the infinite wisdom of the universe. It beats our hearts. It breathes us. If we get a cut, it heals us as long as our immune system is properly functioning. And it has more intelligence than what we even can really imagine and stop to imagine. So It's so powerful to acknowledge and get to know. And it's certainly, as I think, a very valuable use of time and energy to get to know the body and the signs of the body and the way that the body is communicating with us. And get to know that language, the way that happens, as something that will pay off in the long run, because the body can also speak to us. It can give us our yeses and our nos. So I'm acknowledging what you shared about embodying healthy aggression, embodying boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
I just gave a course, and in one of the modules, we worked with boundaries and drawing boundaries around ourselves and, sensing into like, where is my boundary? What's my yes and what's my no? Not just what do I think it is or what do I feel it is? Well, how does my body respond to that? Because the body will give a yes and a no. So, I came into this work because I needed the regulation from, my life path and the experiences that I had. And it was really an answer to my prayer. I actually came in first to sensory motor therapy, which is similar. And then I went into somatic touch. And somatic touch was a really, really powerful modality for me because it's a hands-on modality that works with the kidney, adrenals, the brainstem, the whole nervous system. And that was my access point for when things really started. One of the things that really started to shift things for me in a positive direction in my healing and embodiment journey.
How many years ago was that for you?
I think that might have been 2017. So 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It feels like lifetime.
Isn't that wild? Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I keep thinking about the fact that on your website, I read that you're a fluent Spanish speaker.
Yes.
Which I love. I love languages, but I'm not fully fluent in any of them. I took Spanish in high school. I did Swedish and Italian in college. And then I lived in France for a year.
Wow.
And spent a month in Spain. So, but when I was in France, I was an au pair to 3 little French girls and I had to speak English to them. So, and I just didn't put enough. I wish I would have put more effort into learning language while I was there, but hence I did not. But I would love to know, what was your language path and how did Spanish become your language? And across what time frame did you become fluent? Like your travels? I'd love travel, so I'd love to hear anything you want to share about that.
Yeah, we both have that Sagittarius travel thing. So I moved to Europe first right after I graduated from college. I moved to the Czech Republic, and I was friends with a large group of Spaniards, and also some American and Canadians, or people from the United States and Canadians. And I just fell in love with the culture through them. Like I fell in love with this very communal way of doing things, and this very kind of like, let's go grocery shopping together, and this kind of take care of each other type of way of being that really resonated for me. And I grew up in a lot of ways in that type of a community and culture. So I just felt really called to move to Spain. I didn't speak the language. I had taken a little bit of language in college. In fact, it was the only class that I dropped. And when I moved to Spain, I was really a fish out of water, like this American, blonde-haired female.
What college degree did you decide to get, by the way?
I majored in psychology and minored in peace and justice.
Okay. I did, sociology. I thought about psychology, but anyway,
Yeah. Well, so I had taught English. I was teaching English, and I could identify patterns of language. Like I could identify how to teach it. And so I started teaching myself, and I did that for 2 years. I studied for 20 hours a week, and I would log my hours. Like here's reading, here's, vocabulary, I just, in hindsight, it was very intuitive. A lot of people would say, oh, you must be really good at language. And I was like, no, I've worked my ass off.
Yeah, you can swear on here.
Okay. I worked so hard. It was very much like something that I worked night and day at, because to integrate a language is a lot of work. Like we learn that over the course of years when we're young, right?
Yes.
And so that's a lot of work, and there's a lot going on in order for us to do something like that. So, but in hindsight, it was intuitive. I did understand how to teach myself and how to learn it and how to practice, like taking a vocabulary word and imagining that I was having a conversation with someone and actually turning one word into a whole conversation in my mind on the 7-hour bus rides that I would take from Sevilla to Madrid, and I was just bound and determined. I was like hellbound, like I am going to learn this language. And I was determined that I would learn it to fluency. Like I could see in my students that there were people that had been studying English for their whole lives, but unless they went outside of the country a lot, or if they had been brought up on television, like English television that was subtitled in their language, they could speak it fluently, but otherwise it sounded choppy. So I just kind of was like, as long as I can get to fluency, and then after fluency, it was like, okay, and now I want to get to proficiency. But it was a labor of love.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm determined to be fluent in at least one language at some point in my life. Yeah. Did you ever do El Camino de Santiago?
No, I didn't.
That was the month that I spent in Spain. Was doing that trek, and
wow,
really beautiful, and one of my favorite months of my entire life.
Wow. How old were you?
I was like 23 or 24. It was like just after. So I graduated from college and then went to live in France for a year. And at the end of the year in France, spent the month in Spain doing the pilgrimage.
So we were in Spain at the same time.
Wow.
You in the north, me in the south.
Oh, how funny.
Yeah.
Yes. What is captivating you in your life right now?
Captivating me?
Yes.
Hmm. That's a great question. Let me take a pause. Hmm. I think there are a couple things that come forward. One, it feels like there's this really deep call to be of service in greater ways for me. And, we're going through, we're being called as a collective to evolve. And we're just starting to go through these, what I see as like really big fundamental changes. And I mean, I do base some of my information on what I know through astrology, but also, like, I think it's just obvious that we're going through some major, major changes in the systems and the structures that we've been, reliant on and have created are being asked to evolve as we evolve. And I think people are being asked to come forward and to be more conscious participants in their lives and to, become more conscious of not just their outer world. And, we kind of talked about being productive and like what's in the intellect, but what's in their emotional body and what's happening. Like if we want to really be conscious, we do have to get realistic about like, what are the internal drivers that drive my every single day, every moment to moment life experience. We don't just want to be like asleep at the wheel. So I think I am excited about the evolution that's taking place on the planet. I feel excited about that. I feel excited to feel like I've been prepared through a lot of the work that I've done. To me, it's kind of my journey makes a little bit more sense now as we step into this big shift and change. I'm excited to lead in that space. We talked about animism. I think it's all related. The idea that everything's alive, the animals, the plants, like that, we're not just robots meant to like produce, and we're growing beyond that, where people are longing for like a deeper connection with self, with other, with the world around them. I think I'm excited about what I'm seeing as more of a collective shift towards more consciousness, higher consciousness, more self-responsibility, more community. I'm excited to just be more creative. Like, talking about the intelligence of the body, just a simple question of how does my body want to move right now? Or what does my body want to do? In a lot of ways, I also think we're being asked to simplify, like to simplify. I don't know. I think people are starting to understand and realize it's not the outer necessarily, or I'm losing the word right now, but the things that bring us
the
fulfillment.
consumer culture.
Consumerism. Yeah. It's not the busyness that brings us fulfillment. It's not the items that we purchase. I mean, sure, like beauty is amazing, but like people are, I think, ready and longing for something deeper. And so I think there's something being stirred individually in people and in the collective that is begging a question. And I think I'm just excited about that. And I'm excited to, like I said, lead in that space. Because it can be scary.
Yes. I feel like there's like so many like things that I could pull from what you just said, and I got like truth bumps a few different times in your share right then.
Truth
So
I love
yes. So thank you for that. I mean, I feel like, yes, I feel like we're in this time of this shift, and I feel like this, veil has been lifted. And some people are like ready for that, and they're looking for the lighthouses like yourself, like you're being this lighthouse of this like new way and this other lens and ways to embody and to appreciate the world around us, and to acknowledge that like we are the earth, like from dust to dust, like we come from her, we return to her. Or that's sort of my belief, maybe not necessarily your belief, but
so deeply. Yeah.
And I feel like there's, some people that are ready for the lighthouse and other people that aren't ready, and like they put some glasses on or something, and that's not a judgment, because some people just, they might be going through who knows what in their own life, and I'd have
Right. Right.
And I think that, is okay too, to not be ready for it, because there were things that I wasn't ready for at certain times that I am now. And
I think just on that point, it's important to know, I was thinking about this morning, resistance, at least on a nervous system level, is the nervous system saying like, this is too much. I'm overwhelmed right now. So it's like,
right. Yes.
So my compassionate
doses, like a sieve, like they're not ready for the full thing. They're going to put on their glasses. They're still seeing it. And when they're ready, they can take in what they need. I love that you put it in those terms. Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like there has been, even just, so I have been in the birth world for like 15 years, attending births, always like from a young child, like loved birth and babies, but I've been attending births and knowing more about birth, and then also attending deaths in the last like 8 years. So I feel like those are two things that we haven't really also talked about in like our culture. Like there's not very much culture around it. We don't have we just have very like Christian ways of interacting with those things, but not other ways of creating ceremony and honoring them. And those are really important parts of like what I want to bring to the world and show light on those aspects. And I know that like grief has been a big thing for me. And I feel like it's also coming into like the greater awareness. I hear people speaking about grief more and looking for other ways to interact with it, rather than just kind of the typical thing is just to kind of shut it out or like to cry. And not that those things aren't functional at different times, but I also feel like there's so many possibilities of grief can look so many ways. Like there's no one right way to grieve. And I, for myself, I'm feeling called to share about the possibility or the practice of expressing grief through movement.
Yes.
I found that to be like so wonderful for myself. Sometimes I can't find the words, but to be able to put movement to my feelings of grief have been really helpful for myself, and sometimes being witnessed and sometimes not. I'm curious for you, in your experiences of grief, like what have been, helpful to you. And of course, my grief like looked different, like from my first love when I was 25 years old when he died. And my grieving that loss looked really different when I was 26, 27, 28 than it does now that I'm 40 years old. And I'm curious if there are any stories of your own grief that you might want to share, or what things you find helpful in moving through grief.
Well, I love what you named about movement, and just how, first of all, I think grief can be a really scary word for people, and especially culturally, because we're taught like, no, most people are taught like there's no space for that. And so honestly, like, I really think that can be a scary concept, but even if we break it down to just like small disappointments that people might have. Or I love what you shared about the movement. And because, again, going back to like the nervous system does know how to move, charge. It knows how to, just like when we watch animals that are like attacked. And then if the cycle isn't interrupted, the animal will move out the charge. It'll start shaking after, it has to play dead, or it'll run in a circle or whatever. And so the body does know how to move charge. And so I think that's significant to name. I also like movement, and I think one of the other things that comes forward for me related to that and related to grief is that when we push down whatever challenging feelings they are, and for whatever reason, like maybe there's just not the capacity or the tools at the time. But one of the things that I've noted and also have heard is that we also push down our capacity for all the other positive things that we want to experience, like joy and love and intimacy. And so, I think one of the greatest gifts that we can give ourselves is it's part of our aliveness to, like, life is a cycle of having things birth into being and then letting things go, and then and for some people more than others, but even if it's just, small disappointments or whatever they may be, the more that we're able to be present with ourselves, no matter what our experience is, like in my experience, then I can open up more to what's challenging, but I can open up more to what I really want to experience more of too.
Yeah, I definitely have had that like shared similar experience of, my darkest nights and the grief and the sadness have also opened up to this like level of joy and happiness and embracing life in a way that I couldn't have understood had I not also experienced this like depth of grief and loss. And I've been reflecting recently on just the curious nature of us as like humans. So we're on this planet, like swirling through the cosmos. And, in a 24-hour cycle, it turns around. Like we have day and we have night. We have light and dark every single day.
Right.
And yet we're a culture that really only values the light. But they're both really purposeful and needed. And like, we need the night and we need sleep. We're awake and we're asleep, and we need both of those, and they define each other. Like without one, the other is kind of undefinable. Like you need them both.
Right.
And so why do we only focus on one and value one? And how can we find ways to unearth the value in the other side, whether that's night and day, joy and grief, or
right. It's the infinity sign. It's like human spirit, so above as below, dark, light. And
yes,
I think that that's shifting. I think that's one of the shifts that like we're being called to make as humans, and we have to excavate. I think what's happening is more and more people are it's like one of the benefits, I think, of loss or going through something like traumatic or something that, we don't want at the time is, and one of my spiritual teachers, Mary Helnick, says, grieve well. And when we do that, we can expand our capacity. So my experience is that it's kind of like it carves our consciousness. And the container, I know for me, that I hold now professionally is very different because I've embodied my own work. So whether or not you're like a mother and a parent or a professional, or whether or not you're just I think of it as like this inner cathedral that's being carved by these experiences. And I think the more light that people experience, the easier it is to acknowledge the darkness. And I also understand how scary it can be for people that didn't grow up in a home where that was acceptable, or don't have the tools, or have been taught, their whole lives that emotions are bad or wrong, or it's too much. Like both men and women have been taught that. So like one of the things that I appreciated about living in Spain was that there was a bit more space culturally for the human experience. And it kind of felt like there was a bit more space for relationships, and there was a bit more space for life. Like when my boyfriend passed away, some people would be like, es la vida. Like that's life. Like it's a part of life. And so like you're saying, we don't skip over it as much. And I have compassion for the skipping over it.
Yeah, because there are times and places where maybe we need to skip over it at that moment in time, like you were speaking to, if we don't have the
capacity.
Yeah, when I was doing the El Camino de Santiago, I loved that it was, like walking every day and through like small towns and big towns. And one of the things that, yes, I also noticed there, well, first of all, siesta, like that's amazing that they like took pause to like rest in the afternoon. And also like in the early mornings and in the evenings, oftentimes people would be like sitting outside of their doorsteps, or there would be like 4 or 5, like sometimes more, like grown men squeezed together on a bench, spending time together, and that was something that I came across so many times, that they made space and time for their relationships. And sometimes like men just like singing in the square, and women, speaking to each other from their doorsteps or sitting together on doorsteps. And the interactions like in stores and restaurants had more like space to go deeper. And, when I was in France, loving how, dinners, they lasted hours.
Right.
And that was expected.
Right.
I think maybe it's changing a little bit in America now, but yeah, in the US, if you tried to sit in a restaurant for a few hours, they'd be like annoyed at you, and you're like costing them money, and like,
right,
they're pushing you out. But there, it was like so expected that you would just, enjoy the meal across time, and like the talking, that it's not just about like eating the food and getting out. It's about like enjoying that moment.
Yeah. The savoring.
Yes, the savoring. Absolutely. I feel like we don't have enough practice doing that here.
We need to practice savoring. Presence.
Yes. Presence. Yeah. And I feel like there's opportunities in our everyday life to do that. And yet we often rush ourselves. Sometimes it's not even like someone else is rushing us, but I will find myself rushing myself, even if I don't need to like get into the shower and get out like really quick. But if I can pause and be like, ooh, like I'm excited, and I'm gonna like undress myself and then enter the water and be grateful. I've traveled to places where there isn't running water or not hot water or whatever, and just be finding that gratitude for this water and this life force that, we also are water ourselves, so much of us, and really finding presence in even something like a shower. Do you have any practices yourself of presencing or?
Yes. I have scents, like essential oils all over my house, and I'm putting them on all the time. I'm a very kind of sensory person. My moon is in Taurus. So for any astrology people, I love the senses. So yeah, like movement, self-touch. I meditate. in somatic experiencing, there's a practice that I love called tracking the charge. And do you know that practice?
Yeah, but share it.
So you can do this with a visual or without it. And if you were going to do the visual, you just invite your eyes to look around the room that you're in and let your eyes land on something that's either you find neutral or pleasant to look at. And then notice where you feel that in your body. And that feeling in your body might be a neutral feeling, or it might be pleasant. And it won't make sense logically, of course. And then just inviting your attention to land there in this place of either neutrality or pleasantness in your body. And then just inviting that feeling to kind of settle in, to steep in. And to me, that is practicing, right? We don't need to always go into the story of something, but we can just be with sensation. And I always liken it to like if you were going to make a tea and you took a tea bag and you put it in hot water and pulled it out quickly, it wouldn't be very rich. But if you let it steep, it'd be really rich. And so kind of letting that feeling of neutrality or ease really settle into your system. And in my experience, it's through that practice and practices like that, for some people, I mean, there could be many practices, but like going in nature and laying on the grass, or maybe it's a self-touch practice, or maybe it's like cuddling with a loved one or a furry friend. Anything that just brings us a sense of comfort. But I find often when people's minds want to wander, just to bring it back to that sensation, it's so simple, but it's so powerful. That's my favorite.
I remember first learning about like sensation language, and I still sometimes I'm like, but what does that mean? Because we're not very practiced at it. We might use it, but not really understand it at the same time. But so like for people that maybe don't know, I've been taught that we can sort of understand sensation language sometimes by like knowing the opposites, like hot and cold, or light and heavy, or
tension, or contraction, tension, like neutrality or ease.
Yeah, but there's so many possibilities for sensation and how we might put words to it. In one of the emails you sent, that you said that at the University of Santa Monica, in your study of spiritual psychology, you explored the question, what is my soul attempting to assist me in learning through this experience?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you can, speak to your experience with this question, and if you would want to give an example of your life and how that showed up, or,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, I go back to we're multidimensional in consciousness. And the sensation, to me, that's like a body thing. It's like nervous system. Any story or dialogue is our minds, the feeling of like sadness, anger, frustration, peace, love. That's our emotional body. And I mean, we experience that in our physical body. And then in terms of the energy body, and that model that I just described does follow like the kosha model in yoga. I find that universal truths, any modality that I'm studying or practicing, I always look for what are the universal truths, because I find that regardless of the modality, if it's true, it will align with the universal truths. It might just be saying it in a different way, or maybe it's touching on a different level of like diet, like Ayurveda touches on diet, or, so to me, that question that they ask at the University of Santa Monica is, what is my soul attempting to assist me in learning through this experience? And in my experience, it can assist myself and people in kind of taking a bit more of like a meta view or a bird's eye view of what's the greater learning opportunity for me here? What's my higher self or my soul trying to learn through this experience? And whether or not you believe in a soul or whatever, it can be beneficial just to take us out of like our everyday story about things. And so I'll give an example for myself. I used that question a lot when we were going through the pandemic. And, that was a time where there were everyone was experiencing great change and a lot of loss. Like I had a lot of close friends move. We lost the building. So we lost like our school in person. We had to go online. There were so many like losses during that time. And also I was in this spiritual psychology program where part of going through the program is meant to kind of unearth these really deep boulders that we carry around in our consciousness, from lifetime to lifetime, if you believe in that type of a thing. Or if not, if you just believe in one lifetime, like the patterns that we carry and experience repeatedly throughout our lives. And so there's an opportunity to heal those boulders, those patterns. And so I was experiencing like really significant grief and pain. And it felt like I was being like stabbed in my heart. And there was so much there in terms of the layers and all of that, but it went on for so long, and I was doing so much work, but also it was a time where we were like isolated and, it was amplified by not having like our everyday life experience. And so that question, what is my soul attempting to assist me in learning through this experience? For me at the time, it was to, no matter what, to keep my heart open, to just when we want to contract, when our hearts want to close down or put up walls or contract, which is a normal human experience. But for me, it was, how can I keep my heart open and how can I breathe in the light into those places? Healing is the application of loving to the places inside that hurt. So how can I continue to choose compassion, forgiveness, acceptance? And I'm saying that might sound nebulous, but there are actually like real tangible practices that we engage in that assist in that process of healing. And, this concept, whether or not people believe in it, but certainly that we can heal something at the root for the last time. So my intention was like, I'm healing, and my intention is I want to heal this for the last time. And I believe that we can. I believe that we can heal intergenerational patterns for the last time. I believe we can heal personal patterns for the last time. I believe that part of what we're doing as a collective is all of these collective patterns of misogyny and racism and patriarchy are amplified, and we have to look at them. That's part of the process, is like, you can't just feel something with never acknowledging it. It's being brought out into the light. It's painful to look at. It's uncomfortable. It's not going to be easy. And it's through bringing them into the light that we can actually heal them and move forward. And that's a necessary process. So I think that question serves, to bring us into a higher perspective. And it could also be something like positive, like if I look at one of my relationships that I was in with a former partner, what was my soul attempting to assist me in learning? Safety, joy, love, adventure, fun. Like, it doesn't have to be, it could be for anything. So to me, that's a really powerful question, because it can just give us another perspective so that we can have context for what we're going through.
Yeah, it can be, especially in really complex or fresh grief, it can very much, from my own experience, like get very tunneled and focused on, just the negatives and only the fears around that. Like for myself, so when I was 25 and Bjorn died, and I was just like, I'm never gonna love again. I am, like I was afraid to, like I held these two things, right? Like I held this like fear of loving someone else and loving them in that at that level. Like I feel like I might cry, but like I'm feeling just even the emotion from it is still there, like loving someone on that level and then losing them. Although it's my belief that he's not like lost, because I still feel him. I feel his presence in my life. But so I had like that, but then also this knowing that he wanted to continue to live and he wanted to like experience life more, and also feeling this pull towards living life and joy and adventure and to love more and love better. And so I felt like I experienced both of those almost in that deep time, and yet I couldn't, for the first maybe year or more, like I was really more into the like sadness hard part. And then after that, like maybe first year-ish, I was able to open more of myself towards the joy and the love and the expansion of that experience, and to, embrace life in these new ways because of the experience that I had with him.
Wow. It's powerful.
But then for me, I felt like the lesson came around again, like when I then, so years later, I'm like open to love. I fall in love. I fully embrace the love. I create another human being with my husband. And then, holding this life in my womb, and then finding out that she didn't have kidneys, so she wouldn't survive after she was born.
Oh my gosh.
But I could feel her moving inside of me.
Wow.
And, they offer that I can induce labor, which would mean then induce her death or carry her. And so I chose to carry her, and on her terms. She stayed in my womb till she was 30, almost 37 weeks. So like, considered full term. And maybe I'm going into too much detail that I didn't mean to, but like, but when I found out like, and now my first love died, and I felt like that was like one of my big initiations in life and big experiences. And then to be like, and now my first baby is going to die. And I was like, fuck you, universe. Like, what the hell? Like, why is this happening again? Like, am I cursed? Is this going to just like be some repetitive pattern in my life? And, and I don't believe that I'm cursed. I don't believe that it's my fault. I don't believe that it was like that. It just is. And I, can choose to interact with it in whatever way. And I did have all this anger, but then I've also come to just embrace the beauty, that I had such gratitude that she, gave me that experience, that I got to be her mom, that I still get to mother her in spirit now. And that her existence and that mothering experience of her has also amplified the love that I have for my living children now, and has helped me to experience that in this other, or in ways that I just couldn't have contextualized or understood or embodied had I not also been her mom.
Yeah. And I see you as like a medicine woman. And I wonder I don't know if that resonates for you, but I wonder if some of the just comes forward for me, like some of the passages, rites of passage as that.
I haven't like named I've had other people say that to me. And I feel like maybe as I'm now having gathered 40 years, I feel like I can feel into that like archetype and place like within the culture as I've done, birth work and death work myself, and feel really called to support and celebrate both of those aspects of our life.
Yeah.
So I am, leaning into that possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I relate to what you're sharing about, that type of patterning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. We also spoke about just like how we've spoken to it some here, how like grief also has its gifts. But I wonder if you can speak to more about how that shows up for like the people that you work with, or the ways that you work with people and your offerings uh of just journeying through grief, whether that's like a loss of a physical person or a loss of a past self or of an expectation in our life. Grief it's not just about these big deaths. It can also be about so many little parts of life.
Yeah.
So I know for me, one of the things that I noticed in your story sharing Kate Powell's podcast was you brought up the loss of your boyfriend Orlando and his death, and how transformative that was for you. And that really spoke to me and made me curious, because I've spoken to in here, I also had an experience of my love dying at, a young age when our society doesn't really expect it. And I feel like we just don't have that much space right now for death stories. And I'm wondering if you would be open to sharing some about the story of Orlando's death and your grief.
Yes. Thank you for asking. And it's funny because when I woke up this morning, the story was really present, which is never the case. Yeah.
Truth bumps.
I know. And you had asked me if I felt comfortable sharing, and oftentimes the answer would be no. But when you asked that question earlier, it felt like, it was a yes. So, and I think it's interesting that both you and I our loves were the same age, 26.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
I was 23 when Orlando died. How old were you when Bjorn?
Bjorn. Yeah, I was 25.
Okay. Yeah.
That's so similar.
So similar. I'm thinking of where I want to start with this. Well, I guess it's
start with your love, maybe.
Yeah, we met in the south of Spain. We were working at a camp. He was from Madrid. I had decided to move to Spain. I had fallen in love with Spain, as I shared, when I lived in the Czech Republic, and I loved everything Spanish. Just everything, the language, the men, just everything.
The food. Do you love the food?
The food. I didn't say that because I didn't know it till I got there. But yeah, the idea of just absolutely everything. And when I got to the south of Spain, I was working at a camp in Cadiz, which is really far south. And we met at the camp. And I remember and then after that, I had gone, I had traveled around kind of deciding like, where should I live in Spain? And I ended up like staying I won't go into the details, but basically kind of like needing to hitchhike kind of type of thing. I mean, more safe, I guess, than that, but ending up in this house that kind of an earth angel had invited us to in the south of Spain, waking up and seeing all these like white houses with palm trees and desert. And I was like, oh my God, I want to live here. And so anyway, when I met Orlando, we were one of our first nights together, we were on the beach and we were at a kind of a party, a gathering. And I told him, he told me that he had epilepsy. And I said, you know that you can die from that. And he said, yeah, I know I can die from that. But like, I could just, I might fall and I might hit my head and then I'll go in like a really easy way. And he was totally fine with that. In a lot of ways, it seemed like he had just a different perspective than I certainly had. He also didn't have the history of loss that I had had. And when he was 26 and he died in December of 2006. He took out a life insurance policy in November of 2006. So like a month before he died.
Wow.
And I remember talking with him and being really afraid that he was going to die. And he would always give that same response. Like, it's okay. Like, if I go, it means it's my time. And I hated that response because I had had so much loss. In fact, I had even had my dad died when I was really young. I had had a girlfriend in college die from epilepsy. So in a lot of ways, it felt like it was preparing me for that. And we were supposed to go to Chicago. He had bought a ticket to come to Chicago for Christmas. And what's so interesting in hindsight is this like felt sense of knowing something that like at the time and in my context of being human, like I didn't know that I could actually know that. I didn't know that I had the power to know something like that. But there was also this like really deep felt sense that that he was going to die, that I kept brushing off. It wasn't like daily, but it was enough where we talked about it. And I guess, it's maybe just a detail here is like, he was such a like amazingly generous person. Like I remember one time he came, he lived in Madrid and I lived in Sevilla, and we were taking a nap. And when I woke up from the nap, he was like out and he had stocked his whole car full of food, like from Madrid, brought it down. And when I woke up from the nap, he was like the whole kitchen, the fridge, like all the cabinets were full of food and just things like that, where he was just like so generous. And so such a person of service consciousness. And he was also practiced Buddhism. So he had considered at one point possibly becoming a Buddhist monk. And so he was very spiritual. And at the time I was not. And so, I think I'm just pausing here to see like what part of the story do I share even. When he, I'm thinking about like the night before he passed away, and he had wanted to spend the weekend together, and we were both really tired from working and traveling to see each other. And I had said, and his brother was in town, who he hadn't seen in a long time. And I had said, no, like we're going to see each other next weekend in Chicago, to go to Chicago. And so you spend time with your brother, we both need to rest. Like we'll be together before you know it. And we were talking at night and we were both going out to our respective places. And I was worried about him. And I remember brushing it off. And then in the morning, it was a Saturday morning, and waking up and having this feeling like something was wrong, but he was still alive at that point. And I called him and he called me back, but somehow I missed the call. And I remember thinking, like, that's not him. And so, long story short, it was just this feeling of like knowing before getting the news, because it was an unexpected loss. He was not expected to die. He didn't have like a long-term illness or anything like that.
But your intuition, you knew somewhere.
It was so strong. Yeah. And somewhere he knew too, because otherwise he wouldn't have taken out a life insurance policy at 26 years old. Like, who does that? I remember when, after he died, and people came over to tell me, and even before they told me, I knew, and I had this moment. I don't know if you experienced anything like this, where like my body gave way, like I couldn't stand, I couldn't walk, like my knees collapse. Yeah.
Yes, I have.
Yeah. And that's a nervous system response, really. But I remember saying, like, I knew it. And they're like, what do you mean you knew it? And I was like, I just knew. And when I went back to Chicago, I did move back to Spain, but I moved back to Chicago for a bit. And I was in bed, couldn't sleep. I woke up really early. I turned on this lamp next to my bed. And at that point in time in my life, I was not spiritual. I thought it was a bunch of bullshit. And I turned on this lamp next to my bed, and I pulled over one of his Buddhist cards and I read it. And I don't remember what it said, but as I was reading it, the light turned off. And my critical mind said that the light bulb burnt out, but I was overcome with this like incredible peace, such that I fell back to sleep immediately. When I woke up a couple hours later, the light was on.
He was there with you.
Yes. And I was so happy. Like, I was like, yay. I'm like, oh my God, this is him. I just knew it.
Yes.
I grabbed the phone and I like ran downstairs with my pillow, and I told my mom, and I called my best friend at the time, and I'm in the middle of telling her this story, and the light goes out. Yeah. And so to me, that was like the first kind of like, oh, that was my first spiritual experience. And it was like many, 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 many years until I actually ever felt like embodied in that. I mean, at least I want to say like 14 years. I had a very, very, very long road ahead of me, very long at that point. But I don't know, for some reason, that story just came forward to share. And I think because it's not something that we can intellectualize. It's like an experience that we have. And yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like the stories that we share about these, death experiences also like change over time. The way that I share it now is not the way that I would have shared it years ago, or what details, or what, I don't know if you've heard also like story follows state, like in the nervous system. So like the state of the way our nervous system is experiencing the grief or the love or how the death, that our story changes based on our state as well.
Totally. I want to read something, and then I want to ask you a question. And so I mentioned to you that I brought this book in case I told this story. And this was the quote that he was reading. So he had an epileptic seizure, and it brought on a heart attack, and the heart attack stopped his heart. And he was reading this passage. So this is like the day that he died. This is like 365 days of Buddhist passages. It says, by feeling gratitude towards life, I move towards light, wholeness, universal energy, love. I move beyond the bounds of my own life and discover that I am an expression or form of universal life of divine energy.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, I don't know. To me, that like says so much. Yeah. Thank you for asking and listening.
Yeah. And you said you had a question. Do you still have a question?
I do. You mentioned that your the loss of your baby, your child, has influenced and even like helped you to love your own kids more. And maybe you have that experience as well with the love that you lost and the love that you have now. I don't know, but I guess my question is, what's that correlation for you, or what's that experience been for you? How is it that like such a deep loss can lead to a greater loving?
I don't know if I can say the how that is.
What's your experience?
I could say that, yeah, for my own experience, that yes. So like my first love, Bjorn. So when we first met, we were in our teens, and then my parents got, like, we were together, and then my parents got divorced, and it was like this really messy divorce, and it like made me push him away and like break up with him and be like, you don't really love me, and like have that sort of like reaction, which like now I can look back and have like grace for myself, but there's times that I've been like, why the fuck did I do that, or like, be angry at myself for that, but
yeah,
that is what I did. But the experiencing the depth of love with him, and then that loss, just knowing that love was possible, and then also his just who he was, like, and his joy and humor, and feeling into like his desire to live, and just knowing that I was getting to live, that not everyone gets to grow old, and I'm 40, and I feel like, that's a lot older than a lot of people. And I don't know how many like years I have or days that I have left. It gave me the gift of really embracing each day in a way that I didn't know how to, or didn't understand when death wasn't like right in my face, in that way of knowing that in any instant it can be gone. So that experience of his death helped shape, has shaped much of who I am and how I interact with the world and the days and the people, and not like, it has helped me to be less fearful about telling people that I love them.
Wow. Yeah.
And with my children too, I feel like mothering and motherhood is a huge challenge, even if you have like wonderfully easy children or something, right? But even with that, it's a like 24/7 job, and part of the role of the child is also like to challenge the parents and to push the boundaries, and to be this incredible mirror of like who we are in each moment, and to expand us in these ways. And so although I do experience those same challenges and like sleeplessness at night, or, when they wake me up and I really just want to sleep, and yet I am like so grateful that they are here waking me up.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
In a way that I wouldn't have maybe had I not had this experience with Hartley, and have that loss, and then be a part of this greater loss community of other women who had their babies that were stillborn, or that died shortly after birth, or knowing women who had children that died at 2 or 5 or whatever ages, and that they're yearning to either, some that never had children after that, and that yearning to be woken up at night, that yearning for that being of their own flesh and blood to mother. So it just, they, Bjorn, Hartley have really expanded maybe my capacity for that love and that knowing and that understanding how precious this life is, and has also helped me to like find my voice and to challenge myself to like start this podcast and be on other podcasts, and so many parts of my life I could go into all of that, but yeah.
That's beautiful. And I remember when I don't know, I think that this statue that I'm about to share about came forward throughout a season of my life and this statue is, I think it's called Piedad. I don't know what it is in English. I'm not Christian. It's a statue of Mother Mary holding Jesus, but he's really small, but he's an adult. And I remember, this statue I remember learning about it in like an art class in college, but also when I lived in the Czech Republic, I believe it's one of the statues on the Wenceslas Bridge. And I remember passing that statue and feeling such emotion before that statue, because there's no word in the English language for when a parent loses a child. Like when we lose a partner or when we lose parents, there are words for that. Whether or not we relate to those words, widow, widower, orphan, is that a comprehensive dictation and language option? No. But like, there's not a word for when a parent loses a child that I'm aware of. And I remember like seeing this statue and feeling this like really deep emotion of like, oh, there are no words.
Yeah. Sometimes there are not.
Yeah.
Yeah, so many times with women and people that I work with in grieving, that's like one of the biggest asks, is just for presence without necessarily needing words, right? Like wanting someone with me or with that, or they want someone with them that, they feel can like hold whatever they're feeling, but not trying to fix it, not trying to like intellectualize it.
Yeah.
Like the support that we can feel from another human without any words is so palpable and real and necessary.
Right. Absolutely.
I wonder if when you were sharing the story of Orlando earlier and his like path towards his death and the way he transition, well, just the way that he shared his comfortability with death, and that he was like, oh yeah, well, kind of like we all die and I'm gonna die and I could die tomorrow, or however he said it when you were sharing his story. And I just also had this wonder of like what pieces of him do you carry with you now, like that are like any specific or non-specific, like memories or ways he's influenced your life, or the ways that he shows up, or positive joy or laugh, or what ways do you feel him with you and feel his presence and that time that you had with him, and how that influences you now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that I think it influenced me so much for so long that I worked hard to like not have it influence me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like I got a tattoo on my foot that was similar to the tattoo that he had on his back. It's a sun. It's very aesthetically pleasing. I like it. And it was worth it to get it. And I also have a tattoo that I got in representation of my dad's loss. And I realized, I got the tattoos when I was young. And I realize now, like, I don't need a tattoo to symbolize anything. Like it's inside of me. It's written in like my consciousness. I think that it was such a catalytic event in my life that my life was forever changed and is forever changed. Like it was a before and an after.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also because I didn't have the resourcefulness, I didn't have the foundation of resilience and tools, or, I was living in a foreign country and by myself, essentially. Now, his family was so incredibly supportive, and so were my friends and just that culture, generally speaking. But I almost feel like my path is a reflection of that. In other words, it's like the work that I do in the world. Who is it that says my example is my life, or my message is my life, or something like that? Like, that's how it feels. It feels like the service.
Like you're a living legacy of him almost, maybe. I don't know if that's the right word.
Yeah, that like catalytic event that like, I think most of me sees that now that it as a positive. And even if not, I mean, like, we have to be in acceptance with our lives. Like, in a lot of ways, control is an illusion.
Yes.
I think that certainly I've felt him. And also, like, I don't need to feel him. I want to move forward, and I have moved forward, and I've had great love that I also had to let go of. So there's that pattern. And for me, that's where that question of what is my soul attempting to assist me in learning through this experience? It's like, I believe in that patterns will. Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. I think we froze for a minute.
Froze for a second.
Yeah, I think I believe in the completion of patterns, but if something's not complete, like Carl Jung says something to the effect of like, I'm going to butcher this quote, like, whatever's unconscious, unless we make it conscious, it will show up in our lives as fate. And so for me, bringing everything from the unconscious into conscious, the light of conscious awareness, has been my journey to be free of these patterns of loss and those types of related experiences. Now, I can't control what the rest of my life holds, but certainly I do my due diligence to like work in my consciousness to really feel completion around a lot of what I've experienced. And I guess I'm going on a tangent a little bit, but I don't know. My journey makes sense now, but it was a long road of kind of breadcrumbing and not really knowing where it was all leading. And like I said, now it certainly makes sense, especially like the shifts that we're being asked to experience collectively. And yeah, the great transformation that something like that brings about that we wouldn't otherwise choose. Like, who would choose that consciously?
No. Right. Yeah, I wouldn't.
Right. But if it happens, or it's like it takes you on a journey and you have to kind of like get on board with what that is and what are the lessons and what is required for healing. What are the modalities that work? And on my path, the Western road didn't work for me. The Western model was not cutting it.
Yeah.
So I had to go all these other routes. But I feel as a result that those are the modalities that people are seeking now. Like those are the powerful modalities that really answer the call to, like, I have this symptom. How do I heal that symptom? I'm being a little bit vague, but it's like if we have like a cut, if we have a broken arm and we go to the doctor and we get a Band-Aid, that's not going to do it. But if we get modalities that work on the nervous system level, on the spiritual level, on the, and the mental emotional, then we can really, like, in my experience, see the whole picture. And then there's more of a comprehensive, it's also empowering to be like, oh, I know what's in my consciousness and I know how to relate to it. And it doesn't make it necessarily easy, but at least now I have a roadmap and I'm a lot more aware and conscious, and I can be of service.
Yes. And yeah, healing the whole person. And because you've walked this path before so many, you're able to help them find their path or lead, sort of facilitate that healing in themselves.
Yeah.
I have to jump back for a second to the tattoo because I also got a tattoo from you. For me, it was like after he died and I was in my really dark, sort of depressive grief state, and I was like wearing this one sweatshirt of his, this like favorite sweatshirt and I like wore it like 24/7, like every day, and I was having a really hard time parting ways with this sweatshirt, and so I had made this deal with myself that I would get this tattoo and then I would stop wearing the sweatshirt all the time, and that is what I did. And for me, that was helpful. And like, and yeah, I don't need the tattoo to know that he's with me and that he's everywhere all the time.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. You mentioned the tattoo helped you to not wear this sweatshirt. I remember someone giving me this tool that actually worked for me, which was because I couldn't stop thinking about him, and this was like a year and 2 years after he had passed away. And they told me, schedule it. Like, schedule it. So I scheduled a time, and this can be done for really like anything feels consuming. But I scheduled a time in the morning, like say 7 a.m. and then 7 at night, or like 8 a.m. or 8 p.m. And I would just tell myself, like, I'll think about it at the scheduled time. It was a way of setting a boundary with myself, and that actually worked. Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that practice, because I haven't heard of that one, but I maybe did some similar things for like, especially when like Hartley died, my first daughter. For me, it was like about creating ceremony, like creating little like altars and ceremony. And that was like my way of like meditation and my time to spend with her. And so I would have these like, hour or 2 hours or whatever, that I would create some sort of little altar and just being with her in my own way. And that, creating that space, sort of like you created the time to think about Orlando, that I would create this space to also think about and be with Hartley. And then it, gave the space for that and the honoring, and then also allowed for the other parts of my life to not be as infiltrated or consumed.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I feel our time coming to a close here. I would love for you to share with all the listeners where they can find you and what sort of offerings you have in the world. And of course, I'll include links in the show notes as well, but I like them to be spoken to.
Yes, thank you. So my website is KristinUrbanus.com, Kristin, Urbanus, Urbanus. And I'm a somatic touch and spiritual psychology practitioner, yoga and meditation teacher, and somatic experiencing practitioner in training. I do a lot of one-to-one individual work with people. And in person and virtually. Actually, a lot of the work that I do is virtual. I also lead courses. I just got done leading a course called The Art of Radical Self-Love, and then another course called Monday's Medicine, a somatic experiencing series for self-love and presence. And so I don't have any courses coming up, but I'm sure it's just a matter of a month or two before something.
You have an email list that people can be a part of to know when new things are coming.
Yeah, they can go to my website and sign up through there. Or email me directly, kurbanus@gmail.com to keep up to date. Yeah.
And are you on social media at all? Is that a place that you share?
Yes, at Life Coach Yoga is my Instagram handle.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all your shares and your vulnerability and willingness to have this dialogue here today with me.
Yeah, thank you for creating this space and just a beautiful, nourishing, lovely, deep open space. I can feel the Scorpio sun at work in the space, and such a also like nourishing, earthly, easy vibe. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's an honor. Thank you for tuning in today to The Heart of the Soul. If you love the podcast, I would be so grateful if you would choose to subscribe, rate, review, or share the show. If you feel aligned with me and my energy and are feeling drawn to unearth your wild inner knowing, birth your baby wild and free, need support navigating the medical system, are feeling stuck in your grief, are curious about receiving an intuitive mediumship reading, or need a safe person to debrief and integrate a traumatic birth experience with, I am here for you. I have walked alongside women and mothers for over a decade, witnessing real healing, change, confidence, and stability be unearthed in them. I believe that women claiming their sovereignty, returning to their own inner knowing, and embodying their wild will truly transform the world. To learn more, book your free clarity call at www.birthingnova.love. Until next time, remember to be brave, be loved, be wild, be you, and be the change that you seek for yourself and also for the generations to come. Mwah.